All right, if you're watching this, this is a re-upload that I'm doing of a video that I did about 2 months ago with attorney Dimitri. Attorney Dimitri was so generous to give us an interviewing about extraditions, right? Especially in light with the Shanquella Robinson case. If you want to watch the original video, I will link it in the description box. Again, this is an upload from 2 months ago, playing it back up again so you guys can watch it for those that missed it. All right. Tell me your thoughts in the comments. Now, of course, we have our very, very special guest, Attorney Dimitri, in the house. He's waiting in the back studio for me while I start the intro and just make sure everybody's here and you grab your drinks and everything. We have a set of questions that our members were able to ask first. So we're going to go through those a little bit. And then we have the questions that our regular subscribers had asked. Believe it or not, I went through some of these questions and some of these were very repetitive. So we were able to kind of wean them down a little bit. And there really comes down to really like 5 or 6 major questions that people had as it pertains to the Shanquella Robertson. Shout out to everybody. Let me hit this intro and then we will bring our guests to the channel. Shout out to you guys. Make sure you hit the like button. All right, guys. Help me welcome attorney Dimitri Shaknovich. Guys, attorney Dimitri Shaknovich, this is his website right here that you guys see on the screen. He has been with CBS News, ABC, NBC, Fox. He's corresponded, answered legal questions, and has done a lot of work there. So for those of you guys that have, especially if you're a content creator and you're looking for somebody to maybe ask questions about legal questions, I mean, this would be your man right here. Shout out to him. And again, he was featured and rated by the super lawyers as well. Let me bring our man back. Shout out to you. Welcome, everybody. Can you guys welcome Attorney Dimitri? Everybody, drop a rabbit on the chat and welcome Mr. Dimitri. How are you?
Very good. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you for helping us out. We've been with this Shanquella Robinson bringing justice. A lot of us don't necessarily, that aren't necessarily in the legal field, have a really good legal understanding of how do we bring justice to this woman and what are we doing and what needs to happen. The $1 million question has always been, what's taking so long? So I have seen you talk a little bit about that in terms of like what happens now. We have Mexico that has a warrant. But in your opinion, what's taking so long? What is your legal opinion of this?
my legal opinion is that when a crime takes place in another country, right, the U.S. doesn't control how that country runs its investigation. Okay, if there's an extradition treaty between two countries, between, in this case, Mexico and the U.S., right, and Mexico will seek extradition. The U.S. will conduct a certain analysis here, and if the legal standards are met, then the folks sought to be extradited will be extradited. But that takes a long time. You have to go through the federal courts, ultimately to the Department of State, right? So it takes a fairly long time, and unfortunately, it will take a longer time.
You have people that make the comparison, I think, and I don't know if you can compare it to, say, the Idaho 4, for example, right? That seemed there was a lot of stuff that social media was not necessarily aware of, right? And that is my hope, is that maybe there's just a lot more we don't know, and they're right, whether it's the FBI or the State Department of Mexico, whatever it may be, that they're right on their track to do something. But clearly, it takes a long time. If that is the answer, right?
Well, think about it. You're dealing with a criminal case that took place in another country that has its own processes, its own rules, its own laws, its own government, its own criminal justice system, right? The US in this case is acting purely as effectively a transportation mechanism. That's it, right? But here in the US, folks have rights, even if they are subject to extradition proceedings, even if the criminal case isn't based here in the US. And those rights must be met, which means you have to go through the courts, you have to show probable cause, right? You have to go through the what is really effectively an appellate process, and then up to the executive branch, which will be in charge of ultimately approving the extradition.
So with Mexico, it's not enough that Mexico has this arrest warrant for an unnamed suspect.
It may be enough in Mexico, right? That's not what we're talking about right now.
Right.
Right now, folks are clamoring for is justice in the form of somebody in custody with the expectation they'll be sent over there, right? Once they're over there,
Right.
you are within the Mexico criminal justice system, and however that takes shape, that will take shape. And if they stand trial there, then that will be its own separate procedure.
Absolutely. What do you think? And at last I heard, as far as political, I heard that you had President Biden that went down to Mexico and they were talking about what is it? The border patrol situation and all that other stuff. And I'm just wondering, did it occur to them to say, well, there's a current case right now? I mean, clearly that, because I got a couple emails from people that said, is it possible that maybe that will be brought up? You have this whole thing going on right now with the cartel in Mexico right now. How much of a priority is Shanquella Robinson's case right now in this situation? In your opinion? I don't know.
Well, that's pure speculation. It should be of high priority, right? In terms of President Biden and things of that nature, let's remember, right, that the extradition process in court will be handled by the Justice Department, right?
Absolutely.
Justice Department is an extension, really is the executive branch, right? Biden is the head of the executive branch, right? So there's a hierarchy in place here, and that hierarchy will be met when the DOJ effectively prosecutes the case.
Absolutely. Is there anything in terms of that in any way, shape, or form, because that has been speculated here, that justice could be brought to the U.S. and not Mexico? Like if, say, Mexico fails, can something happen here in the U.S. to the Cabo Six?
It's possible. It seems unlikely right now. It's generally the custom that the U.S. doesn't prosecute foreign crimes. That is the rule. There are exceptions to that rule. If Congress passes a law allowing for it, that can happen, right? Absent that, what you're really looking for is a connection to the U.S., right? The more contacts that the crime really has to the U.S., the likelier it will be that these folks can be prosecuted here. In this particular case, everything seems to have happened over there other than the flight, right, which was to the U.S.
Could the family, say, go after the hotel, for example, for any type of wrongdoing, or the medical staff or anything like that, for like a wrongful death or any type of civil matter, in your opinion?
Yeah, here in the U.S. that would be a possibility. I don't know what the laws are in Mexico. I'm assuming they have some form of justice system where criminal cases and civil cases are distinct as they are here. And if that's the case, then it's possible that can happen.
You've been watching this case for quite some time. Do you feel like, where do you land with this situation? And you've been giving a lot of kind of legal perspective to it. Like, what is your, you saw the video, correct?
Right?
What
There
are
are
your thoughts about it?
defense lawyers say that there are two types of evidence that are impossible to overcome. One is DNA, and the other is video evidence, right? Here you have video evidence, and if the case would be prosecuted here in the US, you would have, it seems, a pretty good case, right? And you would have the legal standards beyond a reasonable doubt and all that stuff, right? Talk about that forever. Assuming Mexico has a similar justice system on the books, which you have to assume because there's a treaty, which essentially means that the countries recognize each other's systems, right? Then it looks like a strong substantive case on the merits and the facts and the evidence. But it will be for the Mexican prosecutors to push that forward.
Oh, wow. Mm. I'm wondering, and also let me see if I can go into the chat a little bit and see what questions, because I know a couple of people had some questions here as well. One of the questions, who needs to issue the arrest warrant, Mexico or the US of A? Well, we have Mexico that issued an arrest warrant, but the US sounds like also needs to issue something as well.
No, not necessarily. Once the case
Okay.
comes over here to the US, typically what will happen is the FBI, which is a federal agency, right, will take control of the investigation and detain the suspects, right? And then they will bring them into court, and then there will be a bail hearing, right? Bail is typically denied in extradition cases because flight is by definition extradition, right? And
Yeah.
then there will be a probable cause hearing, maybe an appellate hearing, and then it'll go up to the executive branch. So an arrest warrant isn't necessarily necessary here in the US.
What is the difference between being detained and being arrested? That is something that has been hopping down all these blogs. If you can give us the criminal defense
The
definition.
constitutional definition of an arrest is the lack of freedom to leave, right? If you watch Law and Order, right, you'll see that when a suspect is in the interrogation room, right, a defense lawyer will come in and ask the detectives, is my client under arrest? And if the detectives say no, they'll say, all right, you're coming with me, right? An arrest means if you're under arrest, you are not reasonably free to leave. And that is essentially what a detention is as well. Custody, detention, there are different ways of saying effectively, again, effectively the same
Okay. And so then, I mean, as far as when the information came out, and again, we don't really know if there's any truth to this, but that Interpol had detained one of the Cabo Six. Is it possible for Interpol to detain anyone or arrest anyone?
Well, it depends on the jurisdictional elements of the case. In a case
Mhm.
like this, it would be the internal agency of the US, which is usually the FBI in these kinds of cases.
I gotcha. I gotcha. So typically, it's not like we can just can you be detained without even your family knowing or people knowing that you've not been detained?
It
Like,
depends on
isn't
how
there
you.
some type of
It's a
go ahead.
complex. It's a complex issue. It depends on how you're detained, right? Because in the U.S., once you're under arrest, once you're in custody, certain rights kick in, right? Like for example, Miranda, right? Miranda only kicks in when you're under custodial interrogation, right? So it depends. And then jumping from that, right? There are time limits within which you must be assigned a lawyer and shown to a judge and things of that nature. But this is different because this is an extradition case. It's not really the same thing as a U.S. criminal case.
Gotcha. I think a lot of people, Attorney Dimitri, and maybe you have some perspective about this. Here's somebody who says, why are so many attorneys, including Nancy Grace, in conflict as to the correct legal process? You know, we hear Nancy Grace on her podcast, right? And then we hear kind of different legal professionals. And maybe we're all just hearing different things, but we're all wanting and curious to know, like, what is the right process to something? And if anything, maybe this is kind of encourage people to take a constitutional law course or something, to better understand. But in your opinion, why do you think that there are maybe some people are hearing conflicting things between legal stuff and also some of the bloggers?
Well, I don't know of any other legal opinions, but here's what I can say. The reason that there may be some disconnect right now is because nobody knows anything, right? We are still in the investigation portion of the case. That may take a long time, right? A federal investigation that is led by the FBI, is typically going to be thorough, it's going to be diligent, and it's going to be calculated, right? The feds here in the US do a really, really good job of investigating, right? Sometimes that means keeping facts from the public, right? Sometimes it could even mean keeping certain things from the family, right? Which has been a big issue recently, right? So nobody really knows what is going on internally. There are things that are leaked sometimes, and people comment on what is leaked, but nobody really knows. And that's why there's so much speculation. If this case was in court, right, everything is typically public record, right? You can see what's going on. You can go to the court and see what's happening, right? In the investigation stage, that's not the case. Everything is under wraps and behind closed doors. So that may be a reason.
Absolutely. And then I think we had already answered this, but can the parents sue them in civil court? Them, I'm assuming, Linda, you mean either the Cabo Six or somebody else. I mean, the parents can sue in civil court if that's what they wanted to do, correct?
Yeah, look, in the US, if this happened in the US, they could sue. And depending on how things shake out, maybe they could still sue for something in the US. The majority of this happened in Mexico. I presume they would explore that first, the possibility of commencing a civil lawsuit in Mexico to the extent they're permitted to do that under Mexican law.
Absolutely. Here's another question. Is there a part of the extradition treaty that could allow for the U.S. to prosecute because both victim and defendant are both American citizens?
So, like I said, it's possible that the US will be able to prosecute this. What you're looking for is a nexus to the US, right? You'll have to have some really strong connection to the US in order for the US to be able to prosecute. It's happened before. It seems like this crime happened in Mexico, and a lot of the evidence will be disclosed as time passes. So it's a possibility, is the answer. That's the only answer
Absolutely.
right now.
So the Shanquella Robinson, as far as the treaty goes and everything, this could possibly take, we're not talking about in the next 3 months. We could possibly be talking about years, right?
We could be. I don't think it'll be years. It may be months. It may be maybe a year. I don't think it'll be years.
Okay.
And,
Yeah, I know. And I mean, a lot of us have been, especially on social media, because I think that we've been the pioneers of bringing attention to the
right.
case. So we want to see justice for the family and for what happened to this woman. Um, my other question to you is how, I know you saw the video. There was a picture that was released. I don't know if you were able to see that, Attorney Dimitri, where it was released by the Mexican journalist, okay, where you had the medical staff kind of looking over her.
Right.
You can't see her face, but were you able to see that picture?
I believe so. I believe so. It's been a while since that picture made it out.
Yeah.
I believe
How,
you're talking about.
I mean, when that picture was released, it wasn't released, it was then given to the Mexican authorities. In your opinion, do things like this, can they compromise active investigations? I think and this is just my opinion, but some of us bloggers, we have things that we have them, but we should probably give them to the appropriate authority, the appropriate family. Um, can something like that compromise an investigation, having access to things like that and then releasing them on social media? Can that delay an investigation?
Possibly, right? You're having investigators effectively chase leads, right? And possibly respond to new leads. And again, right, that is why this has been so much under wraps, right? There's a reason for it. It may be frustrating and difficult to take, but there's a reason why everything is so quote unquote secretive, right? What you don't want is to engage in a wild goose chase that doesn't serve anybody's interest well. And so again, it may be frustrating, but there's a reason for the madness.
If I commit a murder in Mexico and I hop over to the US, I'm just gonna give you a hypothetical uh
Right.
situation. And Mexico has decided to extradite me. What is going to happen to me? Here I am in the US, in my home state. What should be expected of me at this point?
You should get a lawyer right away,
Okay.
um,
Okay.
and you should expect some contact from a federal agency. Again,
Okay.
oftentimes it's the FBI, and then you should get ready to fight the bail hearing and the probable cause hearing, and then the habeas corpus proceeding, and then appeal to the Secretary of State. That's what you should be
Gotcha.
doing.
So they would would it be as, and I hate to say it this way, but it's as dramatic as here's the FBI calling my number and saying, are they on their way to pick me up? Is that how that would look like?
Oftentimes, yes, and it depends on the
Okay.
case, right? I've represented somebody in an extradition case, and they were being sought in another country for a financial crime, right? There, you
Wow.
may have some more investigation that needs to be done. Crimes are different. Different countries' investigative processes are different, and so every case is different. But of course, as I will tell any client, you prepare for the worst, and so you make sure that you hire a lawyer, cross your T's, dot your I's, and make sure you at least know what may be coming.
Wow. Okay. So get a lawyer. I mean, and we don't know if these people have a lawyer or anything like that. They have not said anything. They've been very tight-lipped about what has been. They haven't said anything, if that makes sense. Um, oh wow, this is so interesting. Let me look at the chat real quick, uh, Attorney Dimitri, and see if anybody else has any questions. So we had a question. Here's another one. This was something that came up at the death certificate. We had actually talked to a medical forensic specialist, a doctor who practices in Mexico and practices in other countries. And he had let us know that the person that signed the death certificate, the doctor that signed the death certificate, okay, assuming that he's the one that did the autopsy, because that's a separate report, um, is not qualified or trained to do autopsies. It's a separate qualification. So in our, minds, it kind of went into this idea of what could happen. Could that be a reason for a defense for, say, the Cabo Six, right? Because what we found out as well was that the acquittal rate in Mexico for femicide is very high. Is that a possible defense, right? If somebody as a doctor is not qualified to do something, they could use that as a defense mechanism.
Well, here in the US, right, this is possibly a point for what they call cross examination, right? Because
Yes.
witnesses would be testifying and defense lawyers would do what they do, which is try to find inconsistencies in the evidence, right? And this is possibly one of the ways to do that. So here in the US, on cross examination, assuming the prosecution would put that person on the stand, that person's qualifications and what that person did in the case would certainly be at issue.
Right, right. Because they let them go. I mean, they alcohol poisoning was what was said that she had passed away from, and then they just kind of let it go. And I think it's very interesting. Thank you for saying that we have kind of different perspectives from different attorneys and stuff like that. But a lot of us were curious about how are they going to defend themselves from this. So if that's a cross examination thing, maybe that's what it'll be. You know.
Once again, it's tough for me to hypothesize how things would happen in Mexico because I'm not a lawyer in Mexico. Here in the US, you would get all the evidence. That would take a long time. You would presumably get grand jury testimony, right? Recounting some of the facts, right? So, once all that's in, then a defense lawyer prepares a defense, right? And that may involve, one point of defense, one theory of defense, as they call it, or many, right? It's the defense lawyer's duty here in the States to explore every defense for the benefit of their client. That's what defense lawyers should do. I presume that's what their duty is in Mexico.
Absolutely. So even that they could challenge the way in which her death, Atlas luxation, was what was said her death was. But if somebody's not qualified to even make that determination, they can challenge the way in which she died.
Well, causation is always going to be,
Causation.
I don't want to say always, but oftentimes, right? What's not in dispute in, let's say, a homicide, a murder case, is the death, right? And who was involved. Sometimes there's an issue of causation, whether or not there was some intervening or superseding cause, right? Some other reason why this person died. Because if that element can't be met, you can't make out the elements of the crime.
Absolutely. Let me share the other screen where we have more questions from other folks who basically said, and we have a lot of people that are invested in this case. Of course, the $1 million question, why have the Cabo Six not been arrested? We've answered that as well. Let's see. Yes, we've answered about the Mexican journalist problematic and hindrance to releasing information. What is going on with this case? Why is everything taking so long? So here's the deal about that, and this is another question that goes along with that. Do you feel like, in your opinion, that maybe Mexico might have dropped the ball here in their investigation by letting these Cabo Six people go?
It's possible, right? That's a really tough one to answer because you would have to be on the ground and you would have to really know chronologically what happened and when. And we don't know that yet. It's a possibility.
What can people do, in your opinion, Attorney Dimitri, about just continuing to bring justice to Shanquella, and bringing awareness to this?
Well, we're operating in a world now where social media is a powerful tool. And in this case, it's been an enormously powerful tool, and rightfully so. And so people should continue to do that, right? Because there is nothing stronger than that kind of public support and public demand. And so what folks who are passionate about this are doing is exactly what they should be doing.
Do you, in your opinion, do you expect that there be so much misinformation as there is right now with this case?
That's the flip side of the social media thing, right? There's misinformation about everything. And this is no different. And this is such a difficult case, such a case about which people are so passionate. You're going to get misinformation, and not necessarily for malicious reasons. People are hoping and thinking and relying on the justice system and then doing their best to fill the gaps. And sometimes that leads to misinformation.
Absolutely. Ooh, here's a good one. Does public sentiment factor into the speed of bureaucracy? Does conflicts like the extradition of Ovidio Guzman Lopez slow down the process in other smaller cases? Ooh. Sorry about
the
that.
Answer is,
go ahead.
The answer is public sentiment should not factor in at all. Does it? That's a question I can't answer. That's not a legal question. That's perhaps a political question or a public relations question. Legally, it should not.
Okay. That's a great question. Generally, Jenny, thank you for asking that. My goodness. This is my new attorney, my new bromance, by the way, Kat. You're getting a lot of love in the chat, Attorney Dimitri. Shout out to you guys. Make sure you show some love to Attorney Dimitri. And I'm going to make sure in the description box is his YouTube channel, so you guys can watch him. But he's constantly on CBS News. Ooh, sorry about that. This MacBook phone calls and all this other stuff out there. So you guys make sure you check him out. But you're getting a lot of love in here. Wouldn't a lawyer be advising their client to stay quiet and speak to no one, especially in this case?
Yes.
Probably. Yes.
In every case, right? Early on in a case, a lawyer will never tell his or her client to talk to authorities or disclose anything unless it's done under real controlled circumstances where there's perhaps a real benefit going the other way. So if you're asking me as a lawyer, right, not as somebody who's interested in something bad being resolved, then as a lawyer, for sure, you always tell your client to uh, disengage from any potential law enforcement communications.
I don't want to assume, but I'm inclined to believe that if the Cabo Six have shut their social media down, it's probably very much likely that they've had somebody to talk to who told them, shut your social media down.
Possibly, possibly, for sure. You don't want to say anything. You know what I always tell clients in cases that are ranging from very serious to not serious at all is don't talk to anybody. Only talk to me, right? Because everything you say to me is confidential. Everything you say to anybody else is not. And you never know what'll happen, how a case will turn. You never want to talk to anybody, whether it's your friend, your wife, although there are certain privileges that are invoked
I was
there.
gonna say not the wife.
Your mother, your whoever, right? If you can, it's not always easy, right? If you can, try to not go around talking about anything related to a criminal case in which you may be involved.
Absolutely. Oh my God. Let me see what other questions we have. Yes. And a lot of people in the chat are saying he's giving clear and direct answers, and that's rare these days. Shout out to you, Attorney Dimitri. People are appreciating you very much in this chat. So definitely, I would say, Brienne, with international aspects, it complicates this case so much. Absolutely. I think a lot of us are wanting a black and white answer to a case that isn't a black and white type of case, right? You add in the component that it's international. How familiar, here's another, and now this is my question. How familiar are you with extortion, type of situations? Like, uh, specifically, a lot of us are assuming that the Cabo Six paid off certain individuals in Mexico to be back, to say something, to maybe misinform the public about what happened with Shanquella. How familiar are you with people being paid
Well,
off?
so much. That's not so much extortion. That's more that'll fall under
Or
the
not
umbrella.
extortion.
That'll fall under
Oh,
witness tampering. Yep,
yes.
that'll fall under the
Can you say
umbrella.
that again? Say that again. I removed you. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's not so much extortion. That'll fall under the umbrella of things like witness tampering, obstruction of
Yes.
justice. Um, if that's the case, then Mexico should certainly look into prosecuting that too, of course.
Right. Oh my gosh. I mean, that is yeah, and I'm looking in here as well. I just moved to okay, wait, sorry. Somebody's asking a random question. Let me see. Um, a- and I don't want to say in particular that Mexico is so corrupt and it wasn't extortion, it was corruption, the word that I was looking for. That they are so corrupt that they wouldn't know how to do X, Y, and Z. Because I think every country has a level of corruption. Mexico in itself, it might be a little bit more overt about the corruption that they have like most countries. But do you feel like that plays a factor into the legal aspect of that investigation as well?
Sure. So as the extradition case is being defended, right? Once it makes its way up to the Secretary of State, assuming it makes its way through the courts, right? One of the arguments that's often made before the executive branch is that the country seeking extradition is a country that is known for corruption, for human rights violations, for social justice violations, right? And so that may play a factor here. But if there is a treaty in place, then you typically won't overcome the extradition with those types of arguments that may be valid. The U.S. has extradition treaties with all kinds of places, some of which aren't necessarily fair and equitable all the time.
Since you've looked at all aspects of this, I'm kind of wondering, and this is a question that's in the chat as well, is do you feel like justice will be served for this family?
I think so. I think that
Okay.
when you look at all the factors involved here, I think that ultimately these folks will be extradited, and the Mexico justice system, whatever it is, will take shape. So I feel like certainly there will be some degree of justice served.
Awesome. I appreciate you for saying that. And someone in the chat said all countries have corruption, bribery. Um, yes, they do. Sorry, I'm like skim reading. Wrongful death suits. And I think we had already asked that maybe twice about civil suits, but wrongful death suits specifically is not something that could be filed here, correct?
Not in the way that you're thinking about it. There may be certain
Okay.
civil lawsuits filed that may be filed against these folks here in the U.S. But wrongful death, in the sense that you're asking, at least from what we know now, would have to be filed over there.
Right, right. Oh, wow. My goodness. Let me see what else. Anybody else? The chat is everybody's very intrigued, by the way, by the conversation, which I think is great. And I think part of it too is helping quiet down the misinformation a little bit. Because, like I said, we get people here all the time in the chat that say, well, the FBI is closing in. I don't think that the FBI would announce, typically, they don't make announcements like that unless, no, right? They don't leak information,
Right. I mean,
right?
we've all seen the line, "We don't comment on ongoing investigations." Right.
No.
That's
Right, right. They don't comment on ongoing investigations. They don't leak information. So those type of platforms that are kind of giving that, and I think that that's the frustration with my subs and myself is that we come in here and they say, well, the FBI is closing in. I saw it on another channel. So I didn't see it in the FBI website. I didn't see them drop anything like, and you would think that the family, typically by practice, wouldn't the family be informed before the world?
oftentimes the family is advised as to the stages of the investigation. That doesn't mean that the family is kept in the loop about every intricate step, but oftentimes the
Yes.
family is kept afloat of these things. Sure.
Absolutely. And Miss Leslie Beam is saying they say that the FBI in Mexico closed the case. They say that the FBI in Mexico closed the case. I haven't seen any. I highly doubt that that's the case. But people are putting this up misinformation out there that they've closed the case.
I have no reason to
I
believe
haven't
that's.
heard anything.
I have no reason to
Say that
believe that.
again.
I have no reason to believe that's true. It's possible, I
Right.
suppose, but that's all it is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The FBI keeps quiet, and that's why they are the FBI. They can keep secrets until they get your butt. That's what people are saying in the chat. Shout out
Right.
to you guys in the chat. Let's see. Do you hear somebody who said we talked about time frame? Karma says, "How long can this be dragged out?" I had said years. You had said maybe a year, if that, potentially, as far as time frame goes. But this is a pretty complex situation.
It could be dragged out years, right? It could be. I just don't think it will be in this case.
Gotcha. Thank you for saying that. And then you have 6 different individuals though, right, that are involved in this. We don't even know the ins and outs of who and what other than the video and then whatever other information's being leaked. My
Yeah, and
goodness.
that's what part of the FBI investigation will encompass, right? And that is part of what the potential prosecution in Mexico will encompass, right? You have many, many people involved here. Sure.
If I am being investigated by the FBI, of course I'm going to get an attorney. But what should I expect with that type of, if I'm one of the 6, and the FBI is looking at me, what should I
Well,
expect?
well, it's very hard to expect anything. All you
Yeah.
can expect is to not communicate directly, and that benefit will outweigh typically any burden that may be coming from your kind of involvement.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm assuming if there is involvement, then there is definitely something there to be of concerned.
If you're being approached by the FBI, you should definitely be concerned,
Absolutely.
right? In
I'm
this
like, the
case,
FBI doesn't play, does it?
no, federal agencies in general are very thorough.
Thank you. I'm like, yeah, the FBI doesn't play, guys. I wouldn't want to be messing with the FBI. People are desperate for answers, so they are led to draw their own conclusions about what is occurring. And I think that that is something that you all are going to have to decide, right? Where do you land with the information that is out there and what source you use for reliability? Um, Essentially, right? If it was proven they planned it, okay, here's a great question because this was coming, whether intentionality behind this.
Great question.
Chico asks, If it was proved that they planned it in the US, then we could see some justice here."
Yes. So again, as I've said before, right, the closer there is a connection to the US, the likelier that they may prosecute in the US. If there is evidence that this was planned in the US, right? If there's some evidence of a conspiracy or an agreement or something of that nature, then the likelihood of it being prosecuted in the US is certainly higher. That's a great question.
So if it was premeditated, I guess that would be the word, right? Say that the friends had a phone conversation with each other and said, "I'm gonna fight, or I'm gonna get into a fight with Shanquella when we get to Mexico." Something to that. I mean, that would be it, right? Like a
It would be
planned fight.
it would
Go
depend on
ahead.
the totality of the evidence, right? If that comes out, then that's one factor that may help, right? It'll depend on the totality of the evidence, not on kind of one text message, isolated hypothetical text message going one way or the other, right? It'll depend on what the evidence shows in full.
Right. That's a yeah. And I didn't even. Ooh. Didn't even think of that. Do you expect, under the pressure of the FBI, in your experience, do you expect one of these people to break? Like, just
Oh, that's tough to answer. Often, sometimes clients, defendants talk to law enforcement, right? And when you talk to law enforcement, sometimes you say things that are against your own interests. And that may happen here for sure. It's just tough to know because nobody knows, right?
absolutely. Will crossing borders, here's another great question, I think. Let me see. Will crossing borders to commit crime be one of the charges if they planned before they left? Yes. I think
Yes,
that is something totality.
it would be a factor. Correct.
Okay. It would be a factor into what they would look at. And I mean, a lot of people are going, if it, but those were some of those questions. Um, I appreciate you, Attorney Dimitri, for coming into my channel and definitely speaking to me. But what they actually record her, what would they? I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time understanding your question, Michelle. I appreciate you coming. And giving us your time. A lot of us don't really, we're just kind of piecing things together as they're coming about. And sometimes
Right.
that's a good thing, and sometimes it's not, given the fact that, it's so much gray in this.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say? Are you there? Oh,
I'm here. It's human nature. It's human nature to hypothesize, right? That's the bottom line. And people will do that. And it doesn't mean they're bad people or they're trying to do bad things or they're trying to hurt the investigation or impede anything. People will wonder when it comes to something like this. That's to be expected.
absolutely. And what can we, I mean, do we keep hitting the FBI? Do we keep like, listen, FBI? I mean, they're not going to give us any information. Clearly, they've said that, but um
The
keep
easy
bringing it to
answer is
social
to wait.
media?
The easy answer is to wait. That's the easy
Wait.
answer. That's the
Okay.
easy answer, and it's also the hard answer, right? Wait, um, because the FBI more often than not will do a good job.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Guys, this is Attorney Dimitri's YouTube channel right here. I'm watching your shorts and you're uploading, and not only on Shanquella, but various other cases. If you guys are interested in following, and please do follow. I mean, there's a lot of great stuff in there. You guys go check him out. He should be having more followers than 1.1K. I mean, sir, come on now.
I only
You're
started in September, so
Say that again?
I started in September, so
Oh, we
you know, it's been
we gotta
too much.
hurry up. So yes, go follow, and I mean, you will see him either on Fox, CBS News. I mean, you're constantly giving legal opinions about this. Do people seek you out for legal opinions a lot on the bigger televised platforms?
Yeah, I teach constitutional law at a college here in New York called John Jay, which is a terrific criminal justice college. And when an expert is sought out, oftentimes they ask me. And so I'm always happy to help when it comes to this case or really anything about which the public seems to be wondering.
Absolutely. And you guys check the description box. The link is in the description box. I'm going to try to drop it in the chat as well so you guys can go check out attorney Dimitri as well. And I mean, he's got his website if you guys have any other legal questions or legal needs. An attorney from New York City. My goodness. And what's the weather like over there?
It's actually not too bad right now, but that tends
Okay.
to change minute to minute. So I'll count my life.
Awesome. Are you okay, Attorney Dimitri, if I reach out to you if any other legal stuff comes up that we might have questions about? I
Absolutely.
appreciate your time. You don't even know. It's kind of nice to know that, you got some great attorneys that are willing to come to channels, small channels like myself, and give commentary. So I appreciate you for that.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I won't take up your time. You have a great day, okay?
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you guys for watching this upload. I hope you guys have a great day. I will see you around. We will be live tomorrow. Okay. Make sure you check out our backup channel, Rabbit the Blogger. Bye, guys.